Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Aaron, and this is going to be my second installment in my astral projection series, The Science of Astral Projection. I like to view myself as a scientist in the way that I approach everything. So I'm not here to throw magic powder in anyone's face. I only want to teach people what I know and believe to be true based on my own evidence and research. And since there unfortunately is not very much research going into astral projection yet, then I'm sort of taking the leisure to teach you what I believe to be true based on my own experience. And so with that out of the way, I'd like to also start off by saying that there is absolutely nothing magical or woo-woo about astral projection. It is a real scientific process that millions of people around the world can do, and it can be measured and studied. As I said before, there isn't much research going into this science yet, unfortunately, but it should nonetheless be viewed as a science. So the reason I'm making this video is because it's much easier to learn how to astral project if you actually understand on a deep level what it actually is. And I get so many of the same questions that sort of reveal to me that nobody really understands what this is at all, and even fewer people actually take the time out to learn how to do it. So I'm going to attempt to explain the science of astral projection to you in the simplest possible format in order to make this information as readily accessible to you as possible. So with that being said, let's begin. So in order to understand what astral projection is, you need to first have at least a basic understanding about the nature of consciousness. And the first thing to understand about consciousness is that it is not an object, meaning that it is locationless, meaning that it is occupying all spaces simultaneously. Everything we see and experience is made out of consciousness. So if we imagine consciousness as a quantum field, then this becomes a little bit easier to understand. Left by itself, consciousness is just pure awareness. There is no objective qualities there, no phenomenon, no experience, just consciousness itself. So if consciousness wants to have an experience of any kind, it must first make some kind of limited filter or mechanism through which to look through to have a localized experience somewhere. A localized experience meaning consciousness, being an infinite entity, can become a finite entity, can become an object. And this is the way that consciousness can taste duality, or the world of form as we would call it. And so even though everything is ultimately just the quantum field that is stretching through infinity, this field can collapse into individuated particles or units which can condense enough to create what appears to be real matter, real things, real objects. And consciousness basically packs or densifies this light on top of itself to such an extent that when it is zoomed out far enough, it appears to be real solid matter. But we know for a fact that at the quantum level, everything is just light in some kind of entangled quantum relationship. And so this mechanism gives consciousness the ability to have a subject-object relationship with itself. So consciousness, the quantum field, needs something to absorb some of it into in order to have a localized experience, which is what we call our perception. I am inside this body, in this space-time location, and I can have this experience of being this person called Aaron. Ultimately, I am just consciousness. Ultimately, you are just consciousness. You are a filter for consciousness to experience itself through. So in case any of that sounded confusing, here's a very simple example. Imagine consciousness like electricity. Electricity by itself exists everywhere in potential, but until it can be somehow channeled into an object, then it cannot unleash its unbelievable potential. And so we build computers in order to access the power of electricity. We make the physical computer, which is the hardware, and then we write the software programs, which is what tells the electricity how to behave inside of the computer. And through this combination, we can experience all kinds of incredible technology. We can have a face-to-face conversation with someone on the other side of the planet. We can write video games, computer programs, websites, and the list goes on and on. But it's ultimately just electricity, and that's exactly the way that consciousness works. Consciousness needs your body, the hardware, in order to have a localized experience, and it needs your mind, the software, as a filter to look through in order to have different perceptions and sensations. And when you put all three together, body, mind, and consciousness, then you have what we call reality. Now, this is where we start getting into how astral projection works. So your body and your mind keep your consciousness localized in your physical body by giving it many things to pay attention to. At this very moment, Your consciousness is deeply embedded in your physical body because your heart is beating, your lungs are breathing. There's billions of chemical processes happening in every given second. You're aware of your skin temperature, your thoughts and your feelings, etc. And so it's not that consciousness is stuck in your body, it's just that it's deeply focused on your physical body. And so this is why we use sleep as a very useful mechanism to allow us to project our focus out of our physical body. Because sleep essentially shuts down all of these attentive faculties and allows our consciousness a little more room to roam around and play, if you will. This is why it's almost impossible to astral project when you're awake, even though some people can actually do it, believe it or not. The sleep state basically does 95% of the work for you. So if you understand what I've said thus far, then you should be starting to understand that the whole key to success in astral projection is all about being able to lose focus of your body and your mind, because consciousness is all about focus. We direct our conscious awareness based on what we are giving our attention to. Where you place your attention is where you place your energy. And so the problem with that is, if you never meditate and you have really shitty control over your thoughts, then every time you try to get into that trance state to project from, you're gonna have thoughts constantly jumping in and ripping you out of it. So it's gonna make your job a lot more difficult. So I really cannot stress the importance of meditation through finding success in astral projection. Ultimately, astral projection is a form of meditation. I've actually had spontaneous astral projections happen during deep meditative states, and many other people report this happening too. So it's really all about training your strength of concentration, your ability to concentrate on one thing and lose focus of all else. And so the practice of meditation gives us the ability to penetrate into the universe with our concentration and our focus. And now ultimately, your consciousness never really leaves your body because it was never really in your body to begin with. The truth is that your body is inside of consciousness. Everything is inside of consciousness. But when we develop the ability to project our focused awareness outside of the physical body and mind, then consciousness can essentially run outside and play around for a while until Mama Body Mind rings the dinner bell and tells it to come back inside. So in summary, the stronger your ability to concentrate is, then the easier it will be for you to create that tunnel for consciousness to travel through into another dimension. It's helpful to think of it kind of like a radio. Now imagine that your radio is tuned to the frequency of your body mind, and you need to tune it to the frequency of the astral plane. And so if there's too many thoughts and too much noise happening, then that's like radio static, and it's muddying up the frequency from being a clear signal. There's too many things demanding its focus right now. But when you begin to quiet the body and mind, then all of a sudden it's getting a clear signal, and it can start to emit a strong frequency to the radio station it's trying to find, which is of course the astral dimension. Now I know what some of you are probably thinking, and yes, you are correct. When you astral project, you are traveling to another dimension. Pretty crazy, right? Well, the crazier thing is that you actually do this every night already when you dream. You didn't think your dreams were happening in this dimension, did you? If you're having a dream and a doctor slices your brain open, are they gonna see your dream? No, because where is the dream happening? The answer is, it's happening nowhere, because it's happening in consciousness, which is again, locationless. The most difficult thing to understand about consciousness and astral projection is that everything is happening right here. It's all right on top of us. The easiest way to think about that is as a piece of paper. Let's say that we're in this physical dimension on top of the paper, but on the underside, there's a whole nother dimension happening, but it's happening right here under our very noses. We just have to tune our radio frequencies to the right station in order to go there. So astral projection is essentially the art of you being able to focus your concentration into other dimensions. One of the questions that I get asked the most frequently is lucid dreaming the same thing as astral projecting? And the answer is of course, yes. Lucid dreaming is a form of astral projection. And for that matter, so is regular dreaming. When you dream, you are astral projecting. The only difference is you aren't consciously aware of the fact that you're projecting. And so a lucid dream happens when you become aware of the fact that you are in a dream. But all of it is just a different form of astral projection. Most of you are probably familiar with the name Robert Monroe. He's the man who wrote the famous book called Journeys Out of the Body. He has undoubtedly done the most research to date on the science of astral projection, and he actually divided the astral plane up into many different focus areas. However, for simplicity's sake, I like to follow a different model of the astral plane from a man named Frank Keppel. Now, Frank Keppel pushed Robert Monroe's research even farther, and he divides the astral plane up into 4 main focus areas. So it's helpful to use the term focus to describe these areas because it allows us to realize that we are not actually traveling anywhere. We are simply shifting 100% of our focus into a different dimension and therefore being able to experience that dimension. For the sake of simplicity, I like to follow Keppel's model over Monroe's model because I think that it's a whole lot easier, especially for beginners, to wrap their heads around. So I'll briefly explain to you those 4 different focus areas now. So focus 1 is what we would call this physical dimension. Some people call focus 1 the RTZ, which stands for the real time zone. However, I don't really like using this term because it sort of indicates 2 things that aren't true. One is the concept of real or not real, and the second is, of course, time. It's not helpful to use these terms because ultimately, there's no such thing as real or not real, and there's no such thing as time. Time is only an illusion created by the mind that appears to exist in this density, but we know actually that everything is just happening now. But in any case, as I mentioned earlier, because of the fact that your consciousness is so deeply embedded in your body-mind, this is sort of what you could call your home base. But because this physical dimension we are in right now is so much denser than the other dimensions, projecting into focus 1 is actually much trickier and doesn't really yield as much bang for your buck, you could say. But we'll get more in depth on that idea in later episodes. Now, focus 2 is what you could call the dream world. This is the realm of your subconscious mind. And this is most likely where you're going to arrive the first few dozen times that you project. Focus 2 is also commonly referred to as the training grounds because it's basically your own personal dimension with no other entities present where you can sort of roam around and practice your projecting skills. So in focus 2, just like in your dreams at night, you are actually seeing an objective view of your internal subjective world. This is where all of your beliefs, your thoughts, feelings, desires, etc. come to life in 3D Technicolor. So whatever you've empowered with your personal beliefs, you will most likely encounter here. This is why religious people often have these mystical experiences where they see heaven or hell or Jesus or Krishna or whoever, and it's actually just them having an astral projection at night and experiencing the subjective contents of their own mind. This is where regular dreams happen, where lucid dreams happen, and this is a dimension that is completely unique to you. Nobody else can ever experience your own focus 2. And because of this, it makes focus 2 the perfect training grounds to practice using your focus and concentration to create and paint your reality the way you wish. And these skills that you learn here become very beneficial when you start projecting to focus 3 and focus 4. Now, focus 3 is the collective consensus reality of consciousness. This is where all of the consensus beliefs appear and where there's actually real entities and beings traveling around and existing just like in our physical world. Now, when I first started projecting, I wasn't sure if I was ever in focus 2 or focus 3, if I had projected my own dream world and I was interacting with dream characters, or if they were real entities. And this is a question I get asked a lot. How do I know the difference between focus 2 and focus 3? And so when I finally was able to project into focus 3, the difference to me was very obvious. I can't really explain the difference very well, but the answer is that you'll know you're in focus 3 just as easily as you know that the people you meet in real life are real and not a product of your imagination. The focus 3 world is almost hyper-physical. In many ways, it feels and appears to be even more real than this world does. And the upper tiers of focus 3 are very much like our physical world here. You'll actually find billions of people here, many of which are actually trapped in some kind of reality, be that a religious world, people who died in wars, things of that nature. People tend to gravitate towards the realities that match their internal state of focus. So if somebody is very religious, it's likely that they'll end up in a religious consensus reality. If people are dark and evil, it's most likely that they'll appear in a dark, evil reality. And the people who get trapped in these realities unconsciously are in the lower tiers of what we would call focus 3, And when you get to the upper tiers of Focus 3, that's where you're going to find people that are more free of these dogmatic beliefs and more light, more loving and compassionate and willing to help you out. There's even entities here that are so pure and radiate such a powerful vibration of love energy that even the darkest beings in Focus 3 would fall at their feet and sort of melt into jelly in their presence. Beings in Focus 3 sometimes mistake other entities in Focus 3 as being gods. And this is because in the spectrum of consensus realities that people believe in, even in our physical world, the dichotomy is extremely drastic. And you run into all kinds of these different dichotomies in Focus 3. There's heavenly realms here and there's hellish realms here. But not to fear. You're not going to end up in some hellish realm just by accident. You're either going to end up there because it matches your internal vibrational state, and if that's the case, you're probably not watching this video. And secondly, if you purposefully project there yourself. Focus 3 really is an absolutely incredible realm to project into, and there are an infinite amount of unbelievable experiences to be had here. It really is an entire universe waiting for you to explore. And finally, we have Focus 4. Now this one is the real mind blower. This is what you would call the divine realm. It's essentially the source of all energy where pure consciousness dwells, without any projections or any objective quality whatsoever. It is a realm of pure subjective energy, and this is the focus area where people commonly have what we call mystical experiences. In Focus 4, you feel your sense of self being absorbed back into the source, and it's a feeling of indescribable bliss and happiness that really has to be experienced in order to be believed. But I will say that whatever you are able to experience in Focus 4 is only a small fraction of the totality that's there. Because in Focus 4, you're essentially in the presence of infinity itself, the source of all life. And it is impossible for a finite entity to take in the full scope of infinity. Otherwise, you would cease to be finite. So just know that whatever you experience here is only what your particular vessel is capable of absorbing, but not the totality of infinity itself. Infinity itself can never be truly experienced because it is always beyond the cusp of what can be experienced. But I will say that if you do experience Focus 4, then it will certainly wipe away any fears of death that you have, because this will show you the illusory nature of the concept that we call death. It'll show you that there really is no such thing as death because there's no such thing as time. There is only expanding consciousness. Consciousness has always been expanding and always will be expanding. And so that which we call death is nothing more than the transition from this period of expansion into the next period of expansion. And the last thing that's important to mention is an area that most people refer to as the void. This is, you could say, the quantum field of possibility. I like to call it the 3D blackness, because when you project here, it's very obvious that you're no longer staring at the back of your eyelids. It feels a lot more like you're floating in outer space. And this is a really cool realm, honestly, because it's usually where you'll end up when you first pop out of your body. And it's an area where you can sort of just chill back and meditate and relax in that sort of blissful feeling, or you can begin to project somewhere or create something if you wish to do that instead. But as you begin learning how to project, you'll start to get very familiar with this void, and it'll be kind of the place that you consider your home base and access point into the astral plane. So just remember that these categories I've given you are just a guidance mechanism to help you along getting started on your journey. Once you have a foundational understanding of astral projection and you begin to explore, then you can start building models of your own if you like. Because again, the astral plane is something that's been explored and researched very little. So in a lot of ways, it's kind of like a new frontier that's wide open for the taking. The astral plane truly is an uncharted territory for mankind that's just waiting for us to go out and explore it. And with that being said, that about wraps things up for this episode. So until next time, thank you guys for watching, and as always, happy projecting.